must excuse me. I've grown quite weary.
This hasn't been easy, I know. But you've learned a lesson. A lesson in honesty. Honesty to yourself and honesty to others. That lesson will stand you in good stead all your life.
I think we've all learned a good lesson. I've always heard that honesty is the best policy. Now I'm catching on to why that's so, and why that's so, and why that's so.
Greetings, dear listeners, and welcome to Tales from Atlantis, where we take you on a journey through Chicano, Mexicano, and Mesoamerican history and archaeology, and along the way, we challenge pseudo-historical distortions and confront the disinformation that too often surrounds these very topics. We are your hosts, Curly Tlapoyawa.
And Ruben Arellano Tlacateca.
What is going on, Dr. Tlacatecat? How are you today?
Just here.
Yeah?
Just ruminating on things. This weekend marked the 53rd anniversary of the commemoration of the murder and killing of Santos Rodriguez here in Dallas back in 1973 by a Dallas cop. And there were several events that happened in the community, memorials and talks and graveside visit and just vigils and remembrances, because that's still kind of a sore spot for our community here in Dallas.
Where is he buried?
It's a cemetery called Oakland over in South Dallas, sunny South Dallas. Back when he was buried there in the 70s, that's where a lot of people who were non-white, people of color, essentially were buried there. So Mexican Americans, African Americans, and maybe some poor whites as well. And so he's at Oakland Cemetery, and that's where when we did the 40th anniversary of his commemoration and celebration, it was there as well. It was also kind of a public memorial. But the difference between the 40th one and the one that just occurred this weekend was that back then, they had people from the community, leaders, politicians come out and give speeches and say a few words. And at that time, during the 40th anniversary, the then mayor of the city of Dallas finally made a public apology to the mother. She was still alive at that time. She passed away, I think, a couple of years ago now, 2024, if I'm not mistaken. And so that was the difference between then and now. Like, this time around, it was just a silent kind of remembrance. Just, they had roses there if you wanted to, lay a rose on the grave and things like that. So it was more of a silent kind of remembrance.
Yeah, that's heavy, man.
Yeah, and to this day, that incident, which sparked a march that was that later turned into a riot, is the only major civil rights riot or unrest that occurred in the city of Dallas during the civil rights movement that spanned from the 50s all the way to the 70s, right?
Really? Damn.
Yeah. So there was marches, there was demonstrations, and there was altercations and police brutality. But as far as like a major riot, like think of like the Watts riot that you see when we're looking at documentaries about the 60s and the civil unrest. So think of that, maybe to not to that degree, right? But it was that kind of event that sparked a riot in downtown Dallas. Police cruisers were burned, motorcycles were burned, businesses were trashed, and people were marching up and down the street, and the police were, all over the place, hitting people with their billy clubs and arresting folks. So that was one of the, if not the only major disturbance of that deals with civil rights in the city of Dallas, and it was because of the murder of Santos Rodriguez. So,
damn,
yeah, that's why it's still it's still one of those memorable events here in the city of Dallas that still merits our attention as a community as a whole. So,
damn.
I mean,
that's more people need to know about that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And speaking of history that doesn't often get told, I want to give a shout out to Rich out there in interwebs land for turning me on to the topic that we're going to be covering today. And I'm sure as a Texas historian and Chicano, you already were aware of this individual, but I had not heard of him. And so I was, my ears perked up when Rich sent me some information about this individual that we're going to be talking about today. So I'm excited to get into it because this cat is very interesting. Catarino Garza, Chicano revolutionary. As the sun slowly rose over the Rio Grande on September 15th, 1891, Catarino Erasmo Garza stood on the Texas side of the border, holding in his hands two objects that would come to define his life: a Winchester rifle and a revolutionary proclamation. For years, Garza had fought the dictatorship of Porfirio Díaz through his many newspapers and publications. But on this day, he announced that he was laying down the pen and taking up arms. In the opening lines of his manifesto, he declared,
"The last of the independent journalists today abandons the pen to seize the sword in defense of the people's rights."
Badass. His proclamation denounced the destruction of the free press, political murder, fraudulent elections, and the concentration of land and power, while calling for constitutional government, free trade, and land reform in Mexico. Nearly 20 years before Francisco Madero launched the movement that became the Mexican Revolution, Garza had already identified the grievances that would eventually bring down the Díaz regime. Today, Garza remains largely absent from popular memory, mine included, until I got turned on to this. His name never appears alongside revolutionary icons like Emiliano Zapata, Pancho Villa, or Francisco Madero, despite the fact that he articulated many of the democratic demands later associated with the Mexican Revolution. And this is a shame because Garza was more, much more, than a revolutionary soldier. He was an influential journalist, an international activist, and the likely publisher of El Chicano, a Spanish-language newspaper in San Antonio that may represent the earliest known printed use of the word Chicano as a positive political identity. His life demonstrated that the U.S.-Mexican border has long served as a shared political and cultural landscape where ideas, identities, and movements crossed freely. Born in Matamoros, Tamaulipas, on November 24, 1859, Garza grew up in the borderlands of the Rio Grande, where families, commerce, and information flowed across the river with little regard for political boundaries. After a brief stint in the Mexican National Guard, he turned to journalism, recognizing that newspapers could serve as powerful tools with which to expose corruption, to mobilize opposition, and to unite communities separated by long distances. As a journalist, he was prolific. During the 1880s, he founded or edited several Spanish-language newspapers in South Texas, including El Libre Pensador, El Comercio Mexicano, and El Bien Público. And what was the other one that you mentioned? You said there was
El Chinaco, but I'm not sure if that was his. But it's a paper that was out of Laredo and reported on some of the things that he was doing.
These publications defended Mexican-American communities in Texas while openly criticizing the authoritarian government of Porfirio Díaz. You see, journalism during the Porfiriato was a dangerous profession. Newspapers that challenged the Díaz regime faced censorship, imprisonment, financial ruin, and even violence. Garza witnessed his fellow editors endure persecution, but it was the murder of his close friend Ignacio Martinez in Laredo, Texas in 1891 that pushed him to act. Martinez had used his newspaper to advocate for democratic reform in Mexico and denounce Díaz, and many believed his assassination was orchestrated by Díaz himself. To Garza, The murder of his friend demonstrated that independent journalism alone could no longer challenge the dictatorship. The way he saw it, if the government was going to respond to words with murder, then journalists needed to embrace violence in turn. He recruited a multi-class army consisting of lower and middle-class professionals, poor farmers, landless ranchers, and wealthy landowners, with both Mexicans and Mexican-Americans, as well as a few Anglo-Americans who had married into Mexican families. There's always those guys, right?
Yeah.
The Garcistas, the Miklos of the crew. The Garcistas adopted the slogan, Libres Fronterizos, or Free Borderlanders, which was stitched onto their hats. Garza's revolution was never intended to defeat the Mexican army in conventional battles. With only a few hundred followers, he relied on mobility, surprise, and an intimate knowledge of the Rio Grande borderlands. His forces would cross into northern Mexico, attack isolated government outposts, and then retreat back into Texas before federal troops could respond. The rebellion quickly alarmed both Mexico City and Washington. Although the United States officially claimed neutrality, American authorities cooperated extensively with the Diaz regime. Mexican federal troops coordinated with the Texas Rangers, U.S. Marshals, local sheriffs, and eventually the U.S. Army in an unprecedented effort to suppress the Garcista movement. The Harrison administration's military response to the Garza Revolution was extremely bloody and set precedent for U.S. domestic warfare. Leading this suppression was U.S. Army Captain John Gregory Bork, who said,
We'll be back after a quick break.
If you've ever wanted to experience the ancient Maya world for yourself, well, I have an incredible opportunity for you, because Tales from Astlantis is teaming up with the fine folks at the Skeptoid podcast to bring you the mysteries of the Maya adventure. This December, I will be joining Skeptoid Adventures as your guide for the mysteries of the Maya. We're going to travel through the Yucatan, exploring remarkable archaeological sites, uncovering the real history behind the Maya civilization, and separating fact from fiction along the way. Together, we'll examine the archaeology, history, and culture of one of the world's greatest civilizations through the lens of evidence, not sensationalism. To reserve your spot, all you need is a fully refundable $500 deposit. Your deposit is refundable through August 1st, so you can reserve your place with confidence. After August 1st, deposits become non-refundable. Even better, if you heard about the trip from the Tales from Astlantis podcast, be sure to use the promo code CURLY in the How Did You Hear About This Adventure field when you sign up, and you will get a $200 discount. And if you're feeling extra adventurous, you can combine the Maya adventure with the New Orleans escapade and receive $500 off when you reserve both trips. Just visit skeptoid.com/adventures to learn more and reserve your spot. I hope that you will join me this December as we explore the mysteries of the Maya together.
The cheapest thing to do is to shoot them down wherever they are found, skulking about with arms in their hands, and to burn down some of the ranchos which give them shelter.
What an asshole.
Yeah. But it's basically what the official stance of the Rangers and the U.S. Army in South Texas for many, many years during that period.
Yep. Bork, who had spent 15 years in Arizona as part of the U.S. government's war on the Apache people, led his troops on a reign of terror against the Mexican-American communities in Texas, communities that he believed actively supported Garza and his movement. Under his command, the army burned down ranches, threatened families with lynching, stole guns, horses, and money from suspected supporters. Complaints were filed with state and federal officials, but the atrocities were ignored, obviously. But Garza remained active. Even while leading armed expeditions and evading U.S. forces, Garza never abandoned journalism completely. Early in 1892, the short-lived newspaper El Chicano began publication in San Antonio. A contemporary English-language newspaper described it as
the avowed organ of the revolutionists.
Surviving evidence strongly suggests that Garza himself directed or inspired its publication. And while only fragments survive, El Chicano may preserve the earliest known printed use of the word Chicano as a positive, self-identifying political label. The newspaper defended the revolution, condemned the Díaz dictatorship, and linked Mexican-American communities north of the Rio Grande to the democratic struggle unfolding in Mexico. Its title was almost certainly deliberate. Newspaper names reflect the identities that editors wished to cultivate. And by choosing El Chicano, Garza appears to have embraced an emerging identity rooted in shared language, history, and political aspirations rather than national boundaries. Long before the Chicano movement of the 1960s, Garza's newspaper suggests that Chicano already carried cultural and political significance. In the February 1892 issue of the San Francisco Call, we learn that Garza used the pages of El Chicano to ask U.S. President Benjamin Harrison to stop his campaign against the Garcistas. And if you would be so kind, sir.
Okay, so it's entitled Revolutionary Organ. And it says, publication of an alleged letter from Garza to President Harrison. And it's out of San Antonio, Texas, February the 8th. Garza is still in the field. The latent, reliable news of the revolutionists is continued in El Chicano, the first number of a local Spanish paper which has just appeared as the avowed organ of the revolutionists. El Chicano publishes a copy of what purports to be a lengthy letter sent by Garza to President Harrison. It is written under date of January 11th at La Stroeta. Is that what that says? Stroeta? I was having a hard time reading that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
State of Tamaulipas, Mexico, and explains the patriotic purposes of the revolutionists to execute a Republican form of government in Mexico and condemn the press for having placed him in the light of a bandit and violator of neutrality laws. He adds that his only offense is a desire to throw off the tyranny of Díaz and begs that the president will not be misled into further cooperation against him. The letter is in diplomatic form, full of high-sounding phrases, and concludes with a statement that he, Garza, will grow old in the fields with his troops before he will make or accept any proposition compromising the principle of his cause.
Bam.
So he's laying it out right here.
Yeah, and he's a man of his word, too, as we will soon find out.
Absolutely.
I like how they put in this story, though, that it's almost like they're shocked that it was full of high-sounding phrases. Like, since when can Mexicans write this well?
Well, I think it was more like, since when can the revolutionists write like this?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a good point right there. But he was a journalist, so
yeah, that's
there
the
you
part
go. However, by mid-1892, the relentless pursuit by Mexican and American authorities had weakened his movement. Garza managed to avoid capture, but continuing the struggle from within Texas became impossible. Rather than surrender, he chose to go into exile. transforming himself from a border revolutionary into an international one. His journey carried him through New Orleans, Key West, Nassau, Jamaica, Havana, and eventually Costa Rica, where political exiles from across the indigenous South exchanged ideas and built alliances against authoritarian governments. During this period, Garza encountered Cuban patriot José Martí. That's wild to think about.
Yeah.
Although Martí fought Spanish colonialism while Garza opposed the Díaz dictatorship, both men believed that newspapers could awaken political consciousness and that the freedom of the press formed the foundation of political liberty. While in Costa Rica, Garza resumed writing against Díaz and published one of his harshest critiques, La Era de Tuxtepec en México, o sea, Rusia en America, or The Era of Tuxtepec in Mexico, or Russia in America.
I love those old article names because they always had like the two names. It's this name or it's that one too.
Yeah, and then the next one is always like a slam, like a fucking hardcore criticism, right? I love it.
It's like in the other Chicano publication from the 1920s by, what's his name now? I'm blanking on his name. About the parrots, Cuando Pericos Mamen.
Oh, yeah.
Because he has the two names as well, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, the second one is O Cuando Pericos Mamen, right? Like, there's always, like, this really weird, like, comical slant to it, right? That's meant to criticize.
Yeah, and it's always biting. In the pamphlet, he compared the Díaz regime to the Russian Empire, arguing that censorship, political persecution, and centralized power had extinguished constitutional government in Mexico. The comparison deliberately invoked one of the world's most notorious autocracies, and Garza underscored the point by mailing an inscribed copy directly to Díaz, sarcastically addressing him as the eternal czar. Badass. I could just see Díaz getting his mail that day and be like, what the fuck is this? Garza never abandoned hope of returning to Mexico. When civil war erupted in Colombia, which then included present-day Panama, he joined the Liberal Army. He believed that democratic struggles throughout the indigenous South were interconnected, and that victories against authoritarian governments anywhere strengthened the broader cause of liberty. He even hoped a liberal triumph would provide the men, weapons, and financial support necessary for another attempt against Díaz. Sadly, that opportunity never came. On March 8th, 1895, during fighting near Bocas del Toro on Panama's Caribbean coast, Garza was killed in combat. He was only 35 years old. He died far from the Rio Grande Valley, but by then his revolutionary vision had extended beyond Mexico to embrace democratic struggles throughout the indigenous South. 15 years after his death, Francisco Madero launched the movement that overthrew the Díaz dictatorship. Calls for constitutional government, free elections, and political reform echoed demands Garza had articulated in 1891. Yet his achievements have been largely overshadowed by the more famous figures of the Mexican Revolution. Elliot Young, a historian and author of the book Elliot Young, a historian and author of the book Catarino Garza's Revolution on the Texas-Mexico border, argues that the Garza Revolution represented the largest and most significant armed challenge to Díaz prior to 1910. Young also writes that the borderlands were not peripheral to Mexican history, but central to revolutionary organizing, where political ideas, people, and movements circulated across national boundaries. Garza's connection to El Chicano further expands his historical importance. The newspaper probably preserves the earliest printed use of the word Chicano that I have found so far, anyway, showing that Chicano identity predates the 20th century Chicano movement by decades. It suggests that Mexican communities in the borderlands were already articulating a distinct political and cultural identity grounded in shared history rather than citizenship alone. This interpretation fits naturally with Garza's worldview. Throughout his life, he rejected the idea that the Rio Grande is a legitimate barrier, somehow separating peoples whose histories and aspirations remained deeply intertwined. Garza's legacy returned to public attention in 2024, just a couple of years ago, when Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, or AMLO, announced plans to recover and repatriate Garza's remains from Panama. The effort reflected a growing recognition that Garza belongs among the important figures of Mexican history. Historian Elliot Young welcomed the renewed interest while offering a thoughtful reminder about what matters most. Writing in Time magazine, he argued,
"Rather than repatriating Garza's bones, López Obrador should resurrect Garza's ideas."
We'll be back after a quick break.
As the people of Mérida, Yucatan, experience increasing urbanization and gentrification, there are fewer opportunities for diverse and intergenerational communities to engage with local culture. In response, Lignum was created. Lignum is a community-based space located in Mérida where people come together to connect, create, and grow. Since its launch in 2024, Lignum has offered a community seed bank, contemporary Maya language classes and revitalization programs, as well as workshops on screen printing, documentary screenings, and casual gatherings that nourish both mind and spirit. Most of these workshops are free or donation-based, and they are hosted by indigenous and local experts. At their urban milpa, they practice indigenous science that respects the natural cycles of the region. Lignum is a haven for culture, rest, and resistance. So just check the show notes and click the link marked Support Lignum, and you can make Lignum more welcoming, accessible, and resilient with your small donation. Now, on with the show. I agree. What is it with like the Mexican Revolution and the need to like have body parts or bodies on display as like part of these nationalist monuments? It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
I mean, Mexico's not alone in this, right? It's a worldwide phenomenon, but it's kind of strange.
It's part of the nationalist project, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. You need your heroes.
Especially if you're a secular nation, right? You need to have something that is akin to having some kind of sacred bone, some kind of like Cuauhtémoc's bones, right? Like for instance, right? Something that is as close to sacred and as religious and quasi-divine as you can to make that connection to the everyday, citizen, because you don't have a religion per se that is a national religion, but you do have this nationalist idea of being a nation and what ties you together, symbols.
Yeah,
right?
These symbols, and that resonate deeply with the general populace, right?
So I'm arguing that AMLO needs to repatriate Catarino Garza to the Chicano nation.
There you go.
That's our
Hell
symbol.
Yeah, yeah,
He's
right?
Chicano.
Come on, man. Come on, AMLO.
Well, now it would be Claudia Sheinbaum.
Yeah,
right? We need a petition to Claudia. Hey, repatriate Catarino Garza to the Chicano nation.
Bring our Chicano hero back to Aztlán.
That's right.
Come on now. So more than 130 years after he traded in his pen for a rifle, Catarino Erasmo Garza deserves to be remembered, not only as a Chicano revolutionary, but as a journalist who believed that democracy required a free press, as an internationalist who linked struggles for liberty across the indigenous South, and as one of the earliest figures to imagine a political community that transcended the U.S.-Mexico border. His revolution may have failed, but his vision of democracy, freedom of expression, and justice lives on. Que viva Catarino Garza, and que viva el Chicano.
Que viva.
Yeah, that's an interesting cat, man. I'm looking at the history, not the history. I'm looking at I was reading the headline. I'm looking at the newspaper, the Bocas Breeze from Panama. And they've got a story from 2024, March 17th, 2024, called Excavating History, the Mexican Mission to Recover the Legacy of Catarino Erasmo Garza in Bocas del Toro, which is, I guess, where he was buried. And the story's about 80 individuals from Mexico who came on a mission finding the remains of Catarino Erasmo Garza, a Mexican revolutionary who died here on Isla Colón in the year 1895. So it made national news down there, apparently.
In case there's any confusion out there by some of the people that might be familiar with the story, like we've been calling them Garcistas because that's kind of what some historians, especially Elliot Young, have been using in their work since at least 96, it looks like, especially in his 2004 book about the incident. But they're also known as Catarinos, like going back to the 70s, like some of the stuff that I was looking at that was written originally by Chicanos, like Rudy Acuña and some others, like they were calling them Los Catarinos instead of Los Garcistas.
Okay, I like that.
And I wonder if at the time they were referred to as Los Catarinos, and then over time historians changed it to Los Garcistas, or maybe both were being used at the time. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I just wanted to kind of point that out in case someone was confused about that. When I was doing my dissertation research, this is going back almost, 15 years now at this point. I do remember finding some curious things when I was researching the Miyakan Garza. I was looking into the history of the Miyakan Garza peoples in South Texas. And I do remember that in 2013, what is her name? Let me see if I can find the dissertation. I think she's a professor now. I'm not sure. But her name is Eunice Carmelia Garza. 2013, she received her dissertation and she received her PhD, and her dissertation was called The Archaeology of San Diego, Texas, Memories, Media, and Material Culture of the Site of an Irredentist Rebellion, right? And so she's not looking at Catarino Garza, she's looking at El Plan de San Diego and what happened with that. And in her dissertation, she's kind of tracing the last name Garza because her last name is Garza as well. And she's think she has family in the area, like her ancestors come from that part of Texas. And she makes this kind of offhand comment where she's not claiming that Catarino Garza is a Miyakan Garza, but she points out that a lot of the people who are of that area down in that part of Texas were originally part of the Miyakan Garza or the Miyakan peoples of the border region, right, where there's now parts of Mexico and parts of Texas. And she's saying that, that she's still this is back in 2013, she's still in the initial stages of kind of looking into it, but like she kind of makes the hint that there's a possibility that Catarino Garza might have been a descendant of some of those Garza Indians, like Dr. Garza down in San Marcos. So,
well, that was a question that sprang to mind immediately once I saw where he was from. And I was like,
because it's in that same area. So I wonder if there might be a possibility that Catarino Garza was a descendant of Coatlicans, and so that's an even more, to me, that's even more important for him to be like, if it's true that we want to repatriate him, right? Like if that was a venue that we wanted to pursue, like, hey, not only is he a Chicano hero, but he's also a Coatlican hero from our side.
Yeah, hell yeah. Come on
So
now.
I just thought that was interesting about him. But one of the things that also Elliot Young writes about in his work is, and this is kind of a weird one that I had forgotten about when I was going back and looking at this material for the episode. It came back to me. But Catarino Garza, because through all the politicking that he was doing in South Texas, trying to gain allies, even among the Anglo community, as you pointed out, that there were some Anglos that were on his side. One of the persons who was on the Catarino Garza side of things was a sheriff of Duval County by the name of Sheriff John Buckley. And if that name rings a bell, that's because he was the grandfather of William F. Buckley Jr.,
Oh my God.
the renowned intellectual and founder of the National Review.
That's fucking wild.
Ain't that wild? I'm like, what is going on here? So I don't know what that means for Catarino Garza, but it's just one of those weird things, that the
Strange
world is
bedfellows,
definite.
man.
Yeah, but it's a small world, right? Like, who would have thunk it that Catarino Garza, this hero of, you could call him a hero of the Mexican Revolution because that's what he was. He was a precursor to everything that happened, but also he was a hero to other liberation movements in Central and South America. And here he is, like, connected to the Buckleys, right? That's crazy. Like, wow.
History is strange, man. It's never cut and dry. That's wild.
Very wild.
And then I saw here that the reason that he fled from Texas. So the thinking is that El Chicano probably only published one issue, and that was the one that he made he wrote the letter to the president, right?
And again, what year was that? 1892, right? And that kind of makes sense to me because by the 1890s, the term Chicano was already in wide usage throughout the Southwest. So it's not like we're not trying to say that he came up with the term, right? That's not what we're saying at all.
No.
Right? In case there's anyone out there wondering, oh, yeah, so it was Catarino Garza who came. No, the term was already in usage at the time, and he just happened to name one of his many publications that he did during this period, El Chicano, right? So if anyone out there knows of the actual copy, if we can find the source, that would be great. Because what we have now is like a report that comes from a different newspaper, right? Can you explain the chain here that we have going on?
So the San Francisco Call, and it references El Chicano in 1892. And so, I'm on a mission now. If anybody out there has any knowledge about the whereabouts of a surviving copy or a digitized, archive somewhere that might contain this, I would greatly appreciate it.
And this was out of San Antonio, right?
San Antonio, Texas. Yep.
Yeah. So anyone out there in San Antonio who might have ever heard of this 1890s newspaper called El Chicano, if it's been referenced anywhere that you know of, please hit us up, hit up Curly or myself, whatever, let us know so we can follow up on it.
And from what I'm seeing here, it looks like that the newspaper disappeared because it coincided with Garza's fleeing from Texas. So the same time he fled
just
Texas,
as he was about to start publishing
numbers
under
like.
Chicano, that's when he had to flee.
Yeah. They had offered a reward of $600,000 or 600,000 pesos.
Okay.
I can't make this out. But anyway, a reward was offered on his head, and I guess a lot of people were out for him.
So from the very beginning, the term Chicano has been contentious to the point where, like, just writing in El Chicano is revolutionary.
Yeah. And then the fact that, you have a Mexican American who has this army of Mexican Americans utilizing this newspaper called El Chicano, and their plan is to, invade Mexico and try to overthrow Diaz.
Mexico.
God damn, that's so badass, man. I'm so glad I found out about
that
this
region. down in South Texas has a history of that. Like
Oh, yeah.
before Catarino Garza, if you go back all the way to the 1850s, 1859, you have the Cortina revolt, Chano Cortina. And he was also kind of fighting for the redemption of Mexican Texans or Chicanos, like that's what they were calling themselves at the time. So the thing about the Chano Cortina revolt, right? Chano Cortina was defending the right and the honor of the Mexican people down in South Texas because for the mistreatment that they were receiving, not just by the Anglo establishment, but by the authorities, right? So Texas Rangers, the troops that would be stationed there, the sheriffs, all those people would always, whenever there was some kind of incident or some kind of accusation of something being stolen, a Mexican would always be the main suspect, right? And so this idea of bandits being everywhere kind of begins to surface at the time as a excuse to be able to shoot and kill a Mexican at will. Just accuse them of being a bandit, and you can shoot them, and you can claim that that they were resisting arrest. Haven't we heard that one before, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were resisting arrest, and so thereby they had to be shot, by the arresting authority, whether it was a sheriff, whether it was a ranger, what have you. So this story is as old as the two countries have been in contention, right? Going all the way back to the 19th century, the U.S.-Mexico War of 1846, 1848. But what's important about this story, I believe, and I feel, because a lot of people want to say that Mexican-American identity was forged in the aftermath of the U.S.-Mexico War, because in a sense it did, right? That's the beginning of it. But at the time, most people still saw themselves as Mexicanos. I mean, even throughout most of the 19th century and even into the 20th century, most people just call themselves Mexicanos, right? They understand that it's a little bit different from being a Mexicano from Mexico, but they still see themselves as Mexicanos. But this idea of being a collective unit of ethnic Mexicans, or at least in the case in Texas with Chano Cortina, of being Texas Mexicans, begins in the 1850s because of what's going on, the loss of the land. It goes from being a majority in the hands of indigenous / Mexican people in the South to the hands of Anglo prospectors and landowners, right? And so you get land dispossession, you get political dispossession, you get no respect. It's kind of like the Rodney Dangerfield syndrome, right? Get no respect, right? Get no respect. And so that's what was happening. And so Chano Cortina is one of these guys that says, I've had enough. Forget this, right? And so he's the one that leads one of the first major pushback from the Mexican people, from the Chicano community in South Texas against the Anglo establishment to try to bring back at least some dignity and some respect. I mean, good luck trying to find anyone that'll support you get your land back without a true revolution, but at least give us some dignity and some respect. So I think that the identity of the Chicano community is shaped in the aftermath of the Chano Cortina revolt, at least in Texas. I'm not sure about New Mexico or California, but in Texas, at least, I think that's the origin of the Chicano identity. It's just the aftermath of the Cortina revolt.
Well, for one, I tend to agree with you. And when we put out the last episode with Joe Iracheta, I had made some comments about New Mexican history, and it angered some folks. So I've been getting some messages because I talked about how, in order for New Mexico to become a state, the United States didn't want all the Indians here, and us, the mongrel, right? The mongrel race Indians.
Yeah. There's always the apologists that have a different excuse for why
gosh. Bro.
New Mexico wasn't admitted until 1912. Like, okay, whatever, man. Whatever you say.
And these guys are writing to me and they're like, well, we weren't really Mexicans because... And then they just repeat like the same bullshit narrative that I'm like
nonsense.
Pushing back against. Yeah.
Right.
And a narrative that has widely been like shown to be false. Like we know everything that happened there. Like there's a historic reason why the northern New Mexicans think that they're Spanish.
Right.
And they get tripped up a lot in that they only see the word Mexican or Mexicano as relating to the nation or the country,
right, as a national identity
Mexico.
as opposed to as a racial identity.
And I'm like, it's beyond that though,
right?
You know, and
they don't get it.
They really don't.
They don't want to get it. It's not that they can't get it. They can if they wanted to. They just don't want to because it doesn't conform to their personal bias of who they are and how they identify.
Yeah, and honestly,
that's
it's because they're afraid of the truth.
That's right.
And you know what I say about the truth, my friend?
What's that one?
The truth? Well, it's like medicine. It doesn't always taste good, but it is always good for you.
Right on.
Timoitase.
Que viva el Chicano.
If you've ever wanted to experience the ancient Maya world for yourself, well, I have an incredible opportunity for you, because Tales from Atlantis is teaming up with the fine folks at the Skeptoid podcast to bring you the mysteries of the Maya adventure. This December, I will be joining Skeptoid Adventures as your guide for the mysteries of the Maya. We're going to travel through the Yucatan, exploring remarkable archaeological sites, uncovering the real history behind the Maya civilization, and separating fact from fiction along the way. Together, we'll examine the archaeology, history, and culture of one of the world's greatest civilizations through the lens of evidence, not sensationalism. To reserve your spot, all you need is a fully refundable $500 deposit. Your deposit is refundable through August 1st, so you can reserve your place with confidence. After August 1st, deposits become non-refundable. Even better, if you heard about the trip from the Tales from Atlantis podcast, be sure to use the promo code CURLY in the How Did You Hear About This Adventure field when you sign up, and you will get a $200 discount. And if you're feeling extra adventurous, you can combine the Maya adventure with the New Orleans escapade and receive $500 off when you reserve both trips. Just visit skeptoid.com/adventures to learn more and reserve your spot. I hope that you will join me this December as we explore the mysteries of the Maya together.